Raigeki has the effect to destroy all of your opponent's monsters, and many cards were released to mirror Raigeki's ability to turn the tide of the game, but a lot of them missed the mark either due to how difficult they were to use, or how weak their effects are comparatively. So in this list, we're going to go over all of the worst cards that can destroy all of your opponent's monsters. Clocking in at number 10, we have Time Wizard, a level 2 light spellcaster monster with 500 attack and 200 defense, and the simple effect that once per turn you can toss a coin and call heads or tails. If you call it correctly, you get to access the powerful Raigeki-Like effect to destroy all monsters your opponent controls. If you call it incorrectly, however, you must destroy as many monsters as you control as possible, which is already a pretty bad downside, but also take damage equal to half the attack of all the monsters destroyed by this effect. This is a pretty unfortunate downside, especially because the risk of Time Wizard outweighs the reward, since you also have to take burn damage from your monsters being destroyed, and because it's based on chance. There's no real way to guarantee the positive effect of Time Wizard by itself. But if you do manage to call the coin toss correctly, its effect is extremely strong and mirrors Raigeki exactly, only made slightly worse by the fact that it needs to be summoned to the field rather than being activated from the hand. So in theory, if you were able to have some influence over the coin toss to guarantee that you call it correctly, then Time Wizard would actually become way better. Now in the TCG, the only real way to do this is with second coin toss, a continuous spell card which allows you to redo any coin toss on a hard once per turn if you don't get the result you want. Though even then, it's still 50-50 chance on whether Time Wizard's effects go through. You just get a second shot at it. But in Duel Links, there was a skill known as Master of Destiny, which allowed you to make your first 3 results of coin tosses always heads, provided you had at least 5 cards in your deck which flipped coins. And when Master of Destiny was in its prime in popularity and power, Time Wizard was one of the cards that saw a lot of play. As if you knew your coin flip was going to land on heads, you could simply call heads with Time Wizard to ensure you clear your opponent's field, rather than risking it with a random chance. Though nowadays this skill has been errata to require 7 cards with flip cards in your deck, and further nerfed to skip your own draw phase due to how much utility it had, as you could use it alongside Cup of Ace to essentially act as a Pot of Greed and draw you 2 cards, or Desperado Barrel Dragon to wipe your opponent's field, like Time Wizard with the effect added that it also drew you extra cards. While Time Wizard did see a fair amount of play in Duel Links and it has an extremely strong positive effect, its unwieldy and random nature in the TCG is enough for it to take the number 10 spot on this list, especially now that Master of Destiny has become a lot worse with its errata and power creep of the game. And speaking of power creep, pouring in at number 9 is Acid Rain, a normal spell card that is essentially just a Raigeki for machines, plainly stating that it destroys all face-up machine type monsters on the field. There are actually a few cards that all came out around the same time acting as a dark hole for specific types, some of which are far less likely to see play since they're targeted towards types that aren't really that popular or robust. Breath of Light, for example, destroys all face-up rock type monsters in the field, which is only really useful against Adamanticators. Eternal Drought is even worse as it can only destroy face-up fish monsters, a very insignificant type in comparison to machines. So why does Acid Rain make it on this list? While having the ability to clear the field of powerful machine boss monsters, Acid Rain isn't even the best card in its niche. System Down, for example, does everything Acid Rain does and more. Not only is it specifically targeted towards your opponent's machine monsters, ensuring that none of your monsters are caught in the crossfire, but it also banishes all of their machines on the field and in the graveyard, deleting all of their machine boss monsters. And also any follow-up they might have in the graveyard, all at the cost of only 1,000 life points. The fact it banishes without targeting also allows for a System Down to bypass machine monsters with destruction protection, like Longursu, the Orcus Orchestrator, which is why System Down sees a large amount of competitive play in people's side decks whenever there's a strong machine deck in the meta like Orcus. Comparatively, Acid Rain has never seen any play at all, and is extremely unlikely to while System Down is still legal. Meanwhile, a card like Eternal Drought, while being targeted towards a pretty bad type, doesn't really have anything to power creep it, which is why Acid Rain specifically makes on this list above any other type-based dark holes, even if it hits a more popular type. And at number 8, we have Weed Out, a normal trap card that costs 500 life points to activate, and when it's activated, you destroy all face-up attack position level 3 monsters in the field, including your own. Theoretically speaking, Weed Out isn't the worst card in the world, as while it's superbly specific in what it destroys, it can technically be used as a powerful hit towards decks focused on level 3 monsters. For Phantom Knights and Virtual World strategies, Weed Out seems like it could potentially be an incredible interruption, especially because it's a trap card that you can surprise your opponent with if they're not careful enough to play around it. However, Weed Out has 2 key issues which prevent it from seeing any real use. The first issue is just how specific it is to level 3 monsters, as while this could be particularly effective against the previously mentioned strategies, both Phantom Knights and Virtual Worlds have access to monsters other than level 3 monsters, like level 6, 9, or 12 single monsters in the case of Virtual Worlds, or monsters without levels at all, like XEs or Link monsters which have ranks and Link ratings instead in the case of Phantom Knights, meaning that even against the meta decks it could see some use against, it's not that effective against their boss monsters, making it a very proactive card that can be used as interruption, but a terrible reactive card that doesn't do much more once they've gained access to their extra deck. The second is that Weed Out only destroys attack position monsters, so it can be extremely easy to play around, even accidentally, by just summoning your level 3 monsters in defense position before using them for some kind of extra deck play, making it virtually useless as interruption, especially if your opponent knows that you have it set with something like a trap trick. For what it is, Weed Out is just too specific and too hard to use in order for it to be of any relevance, which is why it makes it the number 8 spot on this list. And at number 7, we have Dragon Laser, a quick play spell card which destroys all monsters your opponent controls, provided you send one Trigon equipped to a Delta Tri to the graveyard. Without its activation requirement, Dragon Laser is actually a better card than Raigeki, as not only are you able to use it reactively during your own turn to clear the board of boss monsters, you can also use it proactively during your opponent's turn to disrupt their plays and prevent them from gaining access to their boss monsters in the first place, since it's a quick play spell card. This kind of versatile removal is currently why cards like Prank Kid's Battle Butler and Mirror Jade the Iceblade Dragon are currently seen playing the metagame, being adaptable in their use as both easy accessible ways to break boards and easy usable interruption. Although as powerful as Dragon Laser's effect is, it's exceptionally difficult to set up. It revolves around equipping Delta Tri with the Union monster Trigon, and this is actually fairly hard to do as both of these monsters have no way of special summoning themselves out to the field from the hand, and Trigon can only equip to Delta Tri using its effect from the field. Even modern Union support like Union Hanger and Unauthorized Reactivation can't help, as they only support a light machine Union monsters, and Delta Tri, despite being a light machine, isn't a Union monster, and Trigon, despite being a Union monster, is a Fire Dragon type. Now, as difficult as it is to equip Trigon, it isn't impossible, as if you manage to get both of these cards on the field, you can set up Dragon Laser's Quick Play Raigeki using Trigon's on-field effect to equip itself to Delta Tri, or alternatively, if you can find a way to put Trigon in the graveyard, you can destroy monster by battle using Delta Tri to trigger its effect and equip Trigon from the graveyard. However, this is pretty difficult to do since Delta Tri only has 1200 attack points, which is a minuscule amount compared to most other normal summonable monsters in the game. And because its effect only triggers in the battle phase, you can't use Delta Tri's effect to equip Trigon from the graveyard during the first turn of the duel, when it would be most valuable to set up a play to interrupt your opponent. Though if you do happen to set up Dragon Laser, you'll have a pretty powerful interruption that can even be repeated over the course of several turns by destroying whatever monsters you may have left with Delta Tri to re-equip Trigon from the graveyard, as long as you've drawn into other copies of Dragon Laser. All in all, due to its difficulty to set up Dragon Laser, it deserves the number 7 spot on this list. It's not a terrible interruption in the slightest, but it requires multiple cards to really be viable when other interruptions, despite perhaps being less versatile, are a lot more accessible and easier to use. Torrential Tribute, for example, has similar versatility in being able to be used both to break boards and interrupt your opponent's plays, and only requires that any player summons a monster, while Dragon Laser requires a very specific setup involving 3 cards for an admittedly strong payoff that's just a bit too awkward to set up, just like the next card on this list. And at number 6, we have Worm Victory, a level 7 light reptile flip monster with 0 attack and 2500 defense. That has the effect that when it's flipped face up, you must destroy all monsters in the field except reptile-type worm monsters, and it gains 500 attack for each reptile-type worm monster in your graveyard. Now, like most Raigeki-like effects, the effect itself is actually solid, especially for worm strategies that are able to send cards to the graveyard with stuff like Snake Rain, or the recently released Agdawa deck Water Lily, so that you can clear the field of all monsters except for your light reptile worm monsters on your side of the field, while also getting a massive beat stick in Worm Victory to deal a huge amount of damage to your opponent, with Snake Rain alone buffing Worm Victory to 2000 attack. The unfortunate side to Worm Victory, however, is that it's a level 7 monster, so it requires that you tribute 2 monsters in order to normal summon or set it to your field. Usually you can circumvent this issue by special summoning high level monsters to your field, either through pendulum summoning or more commonly by a card effect, such as Agdawa deck Water Lily to special summon it from the graveyard, or the Iris Sword Soul to special summon it from the hand. But unless a card specifies otherwise, you can only special summon monsters face up to your side of the field, And there are very few cards which can generically special summon a monster in face down defense position. Even W Nebula Meteorite, a card designed specifically to work with worms, can only special summon Worm Victory from your deck in face up attack position. Although the other worm support card that everybody forgets about, Worm Recall, does allow you to special summon it from your hand to your field face down, but only if you control no other monsters. So while Worm Victory may have a powerful effect, it earns a number 6 spot, although as awkward as Worm Victory is to set up, its effect is more likely to trigger than at least the next card on this list. And at number 5, we have Tribe Shocking Virus, a level 4 monster with the uncommon combination of Water and Thunder type, with a soft once per turn effect, where you can banish one monster from your hand to destroy all monsters in the field with the same type as that monster. At first glance, this is an excellent effect on par with the similar card, Tribe Infecting Virus, a level 4 monster with the more common typing of Water Aqua, with the ability to discard one card from your hand to declare one type of the field, to destroy all monsters in the field of that type. In fact, Tribe Infecting Virus had been on the ban list for over 14 years, and only recently has just come off as early as 2020, rivaling but not matching Raigeki's time on the ban list. So why is Tribe Shocking Virus on this list? Well, astute viewers will have already noticed a couple of key differences between the card text of Tribe Shocking Virus and Tribe Infecting Virus. Firstly, Tribe Infecting has no once per turn on it at all, and saw a lot of competitive play during GOAT format for that reason. Since it has no once per turn, a single copy of Tribe Infecting can keep discarding cards to declare different attributes to wipe your opponent's field of monsters. Even if they have a field of 5 different types, you can discard 5 cards to destroy each one. In contrast, the retrain of Tribe Infecting Virus, Tribe Shocking Virus, has a soft once per turn. You could technically use its effect in a similar capacity to Infecting Virus by summoning out multiple Tribe Shockings to clear out most of your opponent's field, even if it is a bit harder to set up since they have no way to special summon themselves. But the main reason why Tribe Shocking Virus makes it on this list is because you must banish the same type of monster from your hand that you want to destroy. So, in the case of Tribe Infecting Virus, if your opponent controls a dragon, a spellcaster, and a machine, you can discard any 3 cards from your hand to declare a dragon, spellcaster, and machine to destroy them. But for Tribe Shocking, not only would you need to summon out 3 of them, you would also need to specifically banish a dragon, spellcaster, and machine type monster from your hand in order to use its effect to destroy each of those monsters of the corresponding type on the field. And if you just so happen to not be playing the same types of monsters as your opponent, or you happen to not draw into those monsters, Tribe Shocking is essentially a vanilla monster with low stats to boot. It can technically have some use in dealing with decks that only use one type, especially mirror matches, and can even be used as a janky starter for Thunder Dragon decks because of its Thunder typing, allowing you to banish a Thunder monster from your hand in order to trigger its effect when they're banished. But Tribe Shocking isn't really an effective board wiping tool, so it earns a number 5 spot on this list. And at number 4, we have Link Party, a normal spell card with a grand total of 6 effects depending on the number of attributes or link monsters on the field. With only 1 attribute on the field, all link monsters you control gain 500 attack. With 2, all link monsters your opponent controls lose 1000 attack. 3 link monsters of different attributes lets you gain 1500 life points, while 4 lets you burn your opponent, dealing 2000 points of damage. 5 lets you special summon any monster with 2500 attack or more from your deck. And finally, with 6 different attributes of link monsters on the field, you can destroy all monsters your opponent controls with 3000 or less attack. And you can only activate 1 Link Party per turn. Technically speaking, every one of Link Party's effects is beneficial, even if there's only 1 Link monster on the field. All of your Link monsters gain a permanent 500 attack buff, meaning that provided you have at least 1 Link monster, you should be able to get some use out of Link Party. Practically speaking, however, Link Party's effect is extremely capricious because while every effect from 1 to 4 attributes is beneficial and can occasionally be helpful, they're not as impactful as the harder to access effects, which either special summon a high attack monster from your deck, or can wipe your opponent's field of monsters. And in order to guarantee access to these effects, you have to jump through the necessary hoops in order to special summon at least 5 link monsters on different attributes, 6 if you want to be able to destroy all your opponent's monsters with 3000 less attack, and assuming each of these monsters is a link too, that's 12 monsters worth of materials to commit to the field. This isn't impossible, however, as many extra link combos during Master Rule 4 were able to commit plenty of monsters to the field in order to build a board of co-linked monsters, so they could use both extra monster zones, which would lock your opponent out of special summoning monsters from the extra deck. In fact, a lot of these extra link combos summoned out multiple monsters of different attributes, and because Link Party doesn't specify that the link monsters have to be on your side of the field, you can wipe an opponent's entire extra link board away if they have access to 6 attributes. Or if they only have 5 and you can summon at least a beat stick from your deck to break the extra link and let you summon from the extra deck. So you would think that a format where extra linking was common, like a Goku format, Link Party might have been an interesting choice in people's side decks. However, not all extra links relied on monsters of multiple attributes, and those that did often employed the Nightmares, a series of fiend-type monsters of different attributes, which can all discard a card to trigger an effect of their link summon. But more importantly, they all have a continuous effect to benefit from co-linked monsters. The Fire Nightmare Phoenix ensures all co-linked monsters can't be destroyed by battle. The Wind Nightmare Goblin prevented co-linked monsters from being targeted by card effects, and the Earth Nightmare Cerberus prevented co-linked monsters from being destroyed by card effects, including Link Party. So while you can use Link Party to wipe an entire board of your opponent's monsters without link summoning a single card, it's extremely unlikely that your opponent's board doesn't have some kind of protection from card effects, either because of the nightmares or due to a negate like Tri-Gate Wizard. And setting up the 6th Link Party by yourself is more difficult than summoning the Arrival Cyberse at Ignister, since at the very least the Arrival allows it to be summoned using any monsters of different attributes and not just Link monsters. To Link Party's credit, there are some hyper-specific situations in which you could control 3 Link monsters of different attributes, and your opponent controls 3 monsters of different attributes, but those situations are going to be incredibly rare. Link Party is just a little bit too difficult to use to gain access to its ability to destroy their opponent's monsters, something it shares to the next card on this list. And at number 3, we have Blind Destruction. Blind Destruction is a continuous trap card with a relatively simple effect that, on a soft once per turn, during your standby phase, you must roll a die, and destroy all cards in the field that have the same level as the number you rolled. But if you roll a 6 or higher, you can destroy all level 6 or higher monsters in the field. Now, it's not too difficult to see why this card can be pretty ineffective at wiping an opponent's board like Raigeki. It's a random effect which only manages to destroy monsters at the same level you roll, acting as more of an aimless weedout. Furthermore, you can't even use Blind Destruction as a form of interruption since you can only trigger it during your standby phase, meaning that you have to set Blind Destruction on your field, hope your opponent ends on a board of monsters with levels, rather than Link monsters, or Xyz monsters, and doesn't OTK you, hope that they don't remove it from the field, activate Blind Destruction during the standby phase, and then you can trigger its effect if you get lucky, and you roll exactly the level you need to clear your opponent's board, making it an extremely slow and hard to resolve effect, even by trap card standards. What's worse is that, like the name implies, Blind Destruction can also backfire, and end up destroying your own monsters if you happen to roll the same level as a monster you control on your side of the field. So at times, Blind Destruction can be worse than useless, occasionally acting as a detriment, especially because its effect is mandatory, so you can't even choose whether or not you think it's worth the risk to roll the die while it's already face up on the field. The only thing that Blind Destruction has going for it in its favor is it doesn't require any setup at all, which is why it's not further down on this list, as at the very least you can generically use Blind Destruction over and over the course of a couple of turns to eventually clear a board of monsters with levels, which funnily enough contrasts with the number 2 spot on this list. And at number 2, we have Dark Hunter. Dark Hunter is a level 4 Dark Fiend monster with 1600 attack, and like Link Party, it has multiple different effects, this time determined by the number of Dark monsters in your graveyard. With 1 or fewer Dark monsters in your graveyard, Dark Hunter loses 400 attack. With 2 to 4, the opposite happens and Dark Hunter's effect becomes that it gains 400 attack. But at 5 or more Dark monsters in the graveyard, Dark Hunter gains access to its Raigeki-Like effect. By sending it to the graveyard, you can destroy all face-down defense position monsters your opponent controls. This is kind of a ridiculous amount of setup for an effect that isn't really worth it in the slightest. Being able to destroy only face-down defense position monsters really hampers the utility of Dark Hunter. In the modern era, setting monsters is a rarity that even few decks actively want to do, and is usually a sign that you've bricked and can't make a strong play. But if you were to encounter a deck that does actively want to set their monsters to the field like Crawlers or Shaddolls, you could technically use Dark Hunter in order to clear whatever board they set up without triggering their powerful flip effects, if you manage to put 5 or more Dark monsters in your graveyard, which is an absurd amount of setup for such a niche effect. For comparison's sake, Dark Armed Dragon, a card released in the same year as Dark Hunter, not only special summons itself from the hand, but only requires 3 Dark monsters to be in your graveyard to do so. And while it's on the field, it has a not once per turn effect to banish 1 Dark monster from your graveyard to destroy any card your opponent controls. So for less setup than Dark Hunter, you can destroy any 3 cards your opponent controls, even face-up monsters or any of their spells and traps. Or even more if you happen to put more Dark monsters in your graveyard after Dark Armed Dragon is on the field. Dark Hunter just does not have the same utility, and only works in hyper-specific scenarios in which your opponent has actively chosen to set their monsters, or that you flip monsters face down with Book of Moon while also having 5 or more Dark monsters in your graveyard. The one saving grace of Dark Hunter, and the reason why it's not the number 1 spot on this list, is simply because it can have some minor use in stopping flip effects from activating if you manage to meet its absurd requirements for its 3rd effect, and because the number 1 spot on this list just happens to require even a more specific scenario. Last and certainly not least, at number 1 we have Anti-Raigeki, a normal trap card designed specifically and only to counter Raigeki, with the effect that when Raigeki is activated, you can activate Anti-Raigeki to negate their Raigeki and destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Now, in the past, Anti-Raigeki hasn't had the opportunity to see any use at all, mainly due to the fact that the only card it was designed to counter, Raigeki, has either been limited or banned for 20 years, which essentially made Anti-Raigeki a useless card. But with the newly unlimited Raigeki, it's now suddenly just gained an increase in power as the activation requirement of your opponent activating Raigeki is now a lot more common with it at 3 copies. So, unlike in say 2015, you're potentially likely to get some use out of Anti-Raigeki, even if there are other cards which can protect your own monsters from card effects that can negate any card that destroys and not just Raigeki, like My Body as a Shield. So, since Raigeki being activated is now more of a common occurrence, why does Anti-Raigeki still take the number 1 spot on this list? It's because its effect to destroy all monsters your opponent controls actually works to the card's detriment. You see, in the modern era, the way going second tools like Raigeki are used is to either deal with or to bait the interactions of your opponent's monsters before you commit to your own combos. So, for example, if your opponent controls a Borreload Savage Dragon with 1 counter, which can negate the activation of any card or effect, and you have a Dark Ruler No More in your hand, and a card that you really want to resolve, like the effect of Magician's Rod, it makes logical sense that before you use the effect of Magician's Rod, you use the effect of Dark Ruler No More to negate the Borreload Savage Dragon first, so that your monster effect goes through. The same is usually true of Raigeki, as when you're going second, Raigeki is a tool to either bait your opponent into negating it so that you can resolve the effect of another more powerful card, or deal with their interruptions completely by wiping their board. But why is this relevant to Anti-Raigeki? Because when you activate Raigeki, you usually haven't committed any monsters to your field yet, as you're trying to bait your opponent to interact with your going second tools. And because the effect to destroy all monsters your opponent controls is mandatory, you currently can't trigger the effect of Anti-Raigeki even in response to Raigeki if your opponent controls no monsters. So what Anti-Raigeki should really read is when your opponent activates Raigeki, while they control a monster, negate its effects, and if you do, destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Unfortunately, tunneling Anti-Raigeki into an even further niche than it once was, making it worse than other specific counter cards like White Hole, which activates in response to Dark Hole and can protect all of your monsters from the effect of Dark Hole. White Hole at least is activatable in response to Dark Hole all the time, while Anti-Raigeki requires your opponent to control the monster to negate the effect of Raigeki to even be usable in the first place, which lands Anti-Raigeki squarely the number 1 spot on this list. Alright, and that's the list. If you know of any other Raigeki-like effects we may have missed, or you have any ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments.